Real stories. Extreme survival. No fiction. Welcome to Stories by Candlelight.
The Arctic. It's not just snow and ice. It's a giant, white graveyard that doesn't even have the decency to bury you. My name is Sam. Back in the gullies of Mumbai, they called me a survivor. I thought I knew what hunger was. I thought I knew what cold felt like when the monsoon rain soaked through my thin shirt. I was wrong. In the city, you fight people. Here, you fight the air itself. Every breath feels like swallowing 1,000 tiny razor blades. The plane didn't just crash. It shattered, just like our lives. 1 minute we were flying over a desert of white, and the next, the engine screamed like a dying animal. Then silence. That's the thing about the Arctic. The silence is louder than the explosion. I dragged myself out of the wreckage. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, heavy, frozen, disconnected. The wind was howling, a high-pitched shriek that sounded like 1,000 banshees. I looked back at the tail section. It was sticking out of the snow like a broken tooth. "Kabir!" I screamed. My voice didn't even travel 10 feet. The wind just ate it. I crawled, my fingernails scraping against the frozen metal until I found him. Kabir was pinned under a seat, his face pale, his breath coming out in ragged thin puffs of steam. "Sam!" "I can't feel my legs," he whispered. I looked down. I didn't tell him that his legs were twisted in a way that no human legs should be. I didn't tell him that the snow beneath him was turning a dark, sickly maroon. If I told him, he'd give up. And if he gave up, I was alone. In this place, being alone is a death sentence. "Shut up, Kabir," I snapped, using my street voice, the one that doesn't take no for an answer. "You're just cold. Get up. We need to find the rations. We need to build a wall against this wind, or we're both ice sculptures by morning." We managed to crawl into the fuselage. The smell inside was a mix of jet fuel and copper, the smell of blood. We had nothing. 1 flare gun with 1 red shell, a half bottle of kerosene, and a small crumpled packet of 6 biscuits. 6 biscuits between 2 men who hadn't eaten in 24 hours, trapped in a place where the body burns 5,000 calories just trying to stay warm. I looked at those biscuits. My stomach didn't growl. It cramped. It felt like a fist was grabbing my insides and twisting. This wasn't the hunger of a missed lunch. This was starvation. It changes you. It makes your best friend look like a piece of meat. I looked at Kabir's wounded leg, and for a split second, just a heartbeat, I didn't feel pity. I felt a craving. That was the moment I realized the Arctic horror wasn't outside the plane. It was inside me. The sun began to dip below the horizon, but it didn't bring darkness. It brought a weird, ghostly twilight. The temperature plummeted. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was aggressive. It clawed at the gaps in the metal. It seeped through our clothes. "Sam, tell me a story," Kabir groaned. His eyes were starting to roll back. "What story, you idiot?" I replied, rubbing my frozen hands together. "Tell me about the Naka. Tell me about the cutting chai and the smell of the vadapav frying in the oil. Tell me about the heat. I just want to remember what it feels like to be hot." I closed my eyes. I could almost see it. The chaotic streets, the sweat dripping down my neck, the noise of the rickshaws. But when I opened them, all I saw was the blue-white glare of the ice. "The chai was boiling, Kabir," I started, my voice cracking. The glass was so hot you could barely hold it. And the vada pav, it was spicy enough to make your eyes water. We'd sit there and complain about the humidity. Can you believe that? We complained about being too warm. Suddenly, the wind stopped. It didn't fade away. It just ceased. The silence was absolute. It was the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. And then, a new sound. Asterisk, scratch, 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 asterisk. It was coming from the roof of the plane. Something was walking up there. Not a bird. Not a bear. The footsteps were heavy, but rhythmic. 2 legs. Sam. Is that the rescue team? Kabir asked, a spark of hope in his dying voice. I grabbed the jagged piece of metal I'd been using as a knife. Rescue teams don't walk on the roof, Kabir, and they don't stay silent. I looked through a small crack in the fuselage. Outside, the blizzard had cleared for a moment. I saw a shadow. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it moved with a jerky, unnatural motion. It wasn't a man, but it had the shape of one. It stopped right above us. I could see its breath, not white steam like ours, but a gray, thick mist that seemed to hang in the air. The hunger in my stomach suddenly turned into a cold stone of pure terror. I realized then that we weren't just starving. We were being hunted by something that had been starving for a lot longer than us. I reached for the flare gun. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped it. If that thing comes in, I whispered to myself, I'm not wasting the flare on the sky. I'm putting it right through its head. But then the scratching stopped. The weight on the roof vanished. I thought it was gone. Until I heard a voice. It wasn't a scream or a roar. It was a whisper, right at the edge of the metal door. Sam, let me in. It's cold out here. My blood turned to slush. It was the pilot's voice. The pilot who I had seen die in the cockpit with a shard of glass through his chest. He was standing outside, and he knew my name. I stood there, frozen. My mind was screaming that it was impossible. I saw Captain Miller die. I saw his eyes go dull. There was no way he was standing outside in -40 degrees without a jacket, asking to come in. Sam, why are you quiet? Open the door, the voice came again. It sounded like Miller, but there was something wrong. The vowels were too long, like a recording being played at the wrong speed. Kabir started to move. Captain? Captain, help us. Stay down, Kabir. I hissed, pinning him to the floor. That's not him. Look at the shadows. Under the gap of the door, I saw his feet, or what were supposed to be feet. They were bare, blue, shriveled, and bone-white in places where the skin had peeled off. No human can stand on ice with bare feet. No human can talk while their lungs are filled with freezing blood. Sam, I'm hungry, the voice whispered. So hungry. Just a little bit. Give me a little bit of you. I couldn't take it anymore. The starvation, the cold, the fear had all boiled over into a moment of pure Tapori rage. You want a piece of me? I yelled, my voice echoing in the hollow plain. Come and get it, you frozen freak. I kicked the emergency door. It was jammed with ice, but I kicked it again and again until it burst open. The freezing air hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs. I raised the flare gun. There, standing 10 feet away in the moonlight, was the pilot. His flight suit was torn. His chest was still open, the wound jagged and dark. But he wasn't bleeding. He was frozen solid. His eyes were gone, just empty, black sockets, and his mouth was stretched open in a permanent, silent scream. He didn't move like a person. He lunged. I pulled the trigger. Asterisk boom. Asterisk. The red flare erupted from the gun, lighting up the entire white wasteland in a hellish crimson glow. The flare hit him right in the center of his open chest. For a second, he was a silhouette of fire against the ice. He didn't scream. He just fell backward, disappearing into the swirling snow of the trench. I slammed the door shut and bolted it with a metal rod. I slumped against it, my chest heaving. "Sam, did you kill him?" Kabir asked from the darkness. I looked at my hands. They were black from frostbite and soot. I looked at the last packet of biscuits. 6 biscuits. 2 men. And a thing outside that used to be our friend. "No," I whispered. "You can't kill something that's already dead. We have to move, Kabir. As soon as light hits, we move. If we stay here, we aren't just dying. We're joining the menu." The episode ends with Sam looking at the biscuits. Then at Kabir's neck, his eyes flickering with a dark, primal hunger that is far more terrifying than the monster outside. To be continued in Episode 2, The Cannibal's Dilemma. Morning didn't bring light. It brought a thick, suffocating fog that felt like breathing wet wool. The red flare from last night had left a stain on my vision every time. I closed my eyes. I saw that burning silhouette of Captain Miller, or whatever that thing was. Sam. My legs are gone. "I can't feel the pain anymore," Kabir whispered. I didn't tell him that no pain is worse than pain. No pain means the nerves have died. No pain means the frostbite has won. I looked at his feet. They were the color of a bruised plum, almost black. If we didn't get him to heat soon, he'd be walking on stumps if he walked at all. "Listen to me, Kabir," I said, my voice sounding like gravel hitting a tin roof. "We can't stay in this metal coffin. That thing, Miller, he's not the only one out there. This place has a memory, and it's hungry. We need to move toward the weather station. It's only 10 miles. In Mumbai, that's a 30-minute rickshaw ride. Here, it might as well be the moon." I started packing. My hands were shaking so much I had to use my teeth to tie the laces of my boots. We had 5 biscuits left. I ate one. It tasted like cardboard and dust, but my brain reacted like it was a 5-course meal. My stomach screamed for more. It wasn't a growl. It was a physical punch from the inside. I looked at Kabir. He was staring at the biscuit, in my hand with the eyes of a dying dog. "Here," I said, breaking a small piece off. "Eat. We leave in 10 minutes. What about the pilot?" Kabir asked, his voice trembling. "The pilot is charcoal, Kabir. I saw the flare hit him. He's gone." But as I said it, I looked at the emergency door I had bolted. There were fresh scratches on the outside, deep, rhythmic gouges in the metal, and something else, a smear of gray, frozen slime. The Arctic doesn't let go of its own. It wasn't just Miller. The ice itself wanted us. It wanted our heat, our blood, and most of all, our hope. I made a sled out of a piece of the plane's wing and some electrical wiring. I tied Kabir to it, dragging a 160-pound man through 3 feet of snow is a special kind of hell. Every step felt like my lungs were being dipped in acid. Step, breathe, step, breathe, I chanted to myself. The fog started to play tricks on me. I started seeing things. I saw my mother standing in the snow, wearing her old sari, holding a plate of hot rice. I could smell the cumin. I could see the steam rising. Sam, look. It's the Naka. Kabir shouted suddenly. He was hallucinating too. The boys are there. Hey, Rahul, Salam, give us a lift. Shut up, Kabir. There's no one there. I yelled, but my heart skipped a beat. Then I saw them. Figures in the fog. Dozens of them. Standing perfectly still, just out of focus. They weren't moving. They were just watching. Are they rescue workers? Kabir asked, his voice full of a heartbreaking hope. I stopped. I squinted through the haze. They weren't rescue workers. They were frozen corpses, dozens of them, standing upright in the snow like a macabre forest. Some were wearing parkas from the 1970s, others in military gear I didn't recognize. Their skin was pulled tight over their bones, turned into white parchment by the dry cold. It's a graveyard, Kabir, a standing graveyard. We had stumbled into a frost trap, a place where the wind creates a natural vacuum, freezing anything that enters it instantly. These people had been here for decades, and as we walked through them, I realized their eyes were open, pale, milky orbs that seemed to follow us as we passed. One of the frozen figures, a woman in a red jacket, had a small bag clutched to her chest. A ration bag. My hunger spiked. It was a physical pain that clouded my judgment. I let go of Kabir's sled. Sam? Where are you going, Sam? I walked toward the frozen woman. I reached for the bag. Her fingers were locked around it like iron claws. I pulled. Nothing. I pulled harder, and her frozen arm snapped off with a sound like a dry branch breaking. I didn't care. I opened the bag. Inside was a tin of salted beef. It was 50 years old, but in that moment, it was gold. I went to open it, but then I felt a hand on my shoulder. A cold, heavy, dead hand. I froze. The cold from that hand seeped through my heavy coat, through my skin, and settled straight into my bones. It felt like an ice pick being driven into my spine. Sam, you shouldn't take from the dead, a voice whispered. It wasn't Kabir. It wasn't Miller. It was a chorus of voices, hundreds of them, whispering in unison from the fog. I turned slowly. The frozen woman, the one whose arm I had just snapped off, was leaning toward me. Her head was tilted at an impossible angle. Her jaw creaked open, and a swarm of black, Arctic flies creatures that shouldn't exist in this cold poured out of her mouth. Eat, she whispered. Eat and stay with us. The hunger never ends, Sam. Why fight it? I scrambled back, dropping the tin. I ran back to Kabir's sled, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Move! We have to move now! I screamed. I grabbed the wires and pulled with a strength I didn't know I had. We sprinted, or as close to a sprint as you can get in knee-deep, snow away from that forest of the dead. I didn't look back until the fog started to thin. When I finally stopped, my breath was coming in ragged gasps. I looked down at Kabir. He was silent. Too silent. Kabir? He was staring at my hand. My right hand, the one that had touched the frozen woman. It was turning gray. Not the blue of frostbite, but a dull, stony gray. Sam, your hand. I looked. The gray was spreading, and underneath the skin I could see something moving. Something thin and black, like a vein made of ink, crawling up my wrist. The hunger, Kabir whispered, his eyes wide with terror. It's inside you now, isn't it? I looked back at the fog. The figures were no longer standing still. They were crawling. Slow, jerky movements, like spiders on ice. They weren't just ghosts. They were a hive, and I had just invited them in. I looked at the last 4 biscuits. Then I looked at Kabir's healthy, warm arm. For the first time, I didn't see a friend. I saw a solution. The episode ends with Sam's stomach letting out a loud, wet growl sound that doesn't sound human anymore. To be continued in episode 3, The Gray Vein.